Most reels, when you buy them, will come without line, and so you can have the sporting goods department maybe put line on for you. That's a good option. Or maybe you'll want to put some line on for yourself, and eventually you're going to want to change line or put some fresh line on, or your line's going to get low and you're going to need new line. So let's talk about spooling new line onto a reel. Now, of course, if the reel's new or all the line is gone, you'll need to tie that line onto the spool. And I use the uni knot for doing that. We talked about uni knot in another segment on knot tying. So you can refer to how to tie that uni knot or universal knot, and you can use that to tie the line right to the spool. Or something else I'll do, especially with monofilament line, I change my monofilament lines quite often because the monofilament will get weak over time. And you only use really that last couple hundred feet of line for most of the fishing you do. So when my spool gets low, I'll just splice some line onto that and just refill the spool. So I don't have to fill the whole spool. I'll just leave the line that's on there and just put a fresh couple hundred feet onto the spool. And to do that, again, I use that universal or uni knot to splice that fresh line onto the line that's already on the spool. So again, refer to that knot if you need to remember how to tie that knot, to tie those two lines together. That back-to-back uni knot will splice those lines together. So I've taken the line off the spool, and you can see I've threaded it through the rod. My rod is strung up all the way through all the line guides, just as if I was going to be fishing, because as I'm reeling the line onto the spool, I want a little bit of tension in that line as it goes onto the spool. So reeling that on through the rod will give you that tension, and you'll wrap it onto the spool tight so that you won't have problem with loops and tangles. So I've got the spool, the lines on that big spool. That's a big spool of monofilament that I use there. If you change line often, you can get these great big spools of thousands of yards of line and save some money by buying in bulk. And then you can see we've got a pencil stuck through the middle of that spool. This is kind of a two-person operation because you need somebody to hold that spool for you so it doesn't run around and get tangled. And so they just hold that pencil, and then you can see the spool revolves as I start to reel the line onto the reel. Now you'll want your buddy who's holding the spool to use his hands to put a little tension on that spool too, because you don't want it to just come freely off, or again you'll get some tangles. A little bit of tension, and then you can get that tension and that line wrapped onto your spool, onto your reel, tight as it should be. Now let me make one other point about taking line off of these spools. If you wrap the line from that bulk spool onto your reel the wrong way, the line will twist. It's basically got to come off of that bulk spool the same way that it wraps on to your reel spool. Now generally, for most of the spools of line, you'll see how I've got the line coming off the top of the spool. That generally is the way it'll work, where your line won't be twisted then when you get it onto the reel. To make sure that line's not twisting as it goes onto your reel, especially with the spinning reel, after I spooled some of that line on, you can see I've got this line is colored dark so you can see it. I'll stop and open up my bail and take some line off of that spool and make sure it's not twisting. If it's twisting, you'll know it because you'll see the line curl and twist against itself. Here it's just spilling off the spool just naturally, and that means that you're wrapping it on the right way. If it's the wrong way and it twists, it won't work. That line will just be one big mess when you go to fish with it. If the line's twisting on your reel, then you'll want your buddy to flip that bulk spool over. Instead of the line coming off the top of the spool, then it would be coming off the bottom. But most of the time when I'm doing this on these bulk spools, coming off the top is usually the right way. Just make sure you double check it. And then if it's right, have a little bit of tension on that line and just reel that fresh line onto your reel. And you can go as fast as you want to go until you get the reel full. You don't want to reel clear to the edge where it's clear full. You want to leave a little bit of a gap. You can see there, just a little bit of a gap. The spool's not clear full. If you go clear to the edge, again, you'll have some problems with tangles and loops. But that's about as full as you want your spool. And then you can stop there, clip it off your bulk spool. Keeping fresh line on those reels can make a big difference, especially the monofilament will get old and get weak over time. So you'll want to make sure your reels have fresh line on them because you don't want that line to be weak when you hook into that big fish.